Morning, it's Andy from PCR Global with another brief video, just sharing my thoughts, off the cuff thoughts regarding elements related to risk management. Today I'm going to talk briefly about psychological safety. Psychological safety. Just come back from a trip, picked up one of the books that I really do like dipping into, The Relationship Factor in Safety Leadership by Rosa Antonia Carrillo. It is a book I've mentioned before. It gives us some really good insights, the importance of relationships. And Rosa highlights the growing research with regards to how organisational performance can be enhanced by improving those relationships. So what actually is psychological safety? It's a shared belief that the team is safe for interpersonal risk taking. It can be defined as being able to show and employ one's self without fear of negative consequence or self-image, status or career. What does that mean? Basically, you can speak up. You feel free, comfortable and able to highlight concerns. I would say this isn't just about safety, this is about anything in the organisation. Yes, we've got whistleblowing and the Public Interest Disclosure Act, but ultimately we don't want it to get to that level. We want people to feel comfortable. So whether you operate in security or safety, if you don't feel that you can raise any issues, then ultimately we're not going to get that line of sight between senior leadership, mid leadership and lower leadership, or lower sort of operatives, and we are then going to harbour the potential for issues. Sort of like the known knowns and the known unknowns. So organisations that do operate within safety relationships, they build relationships, they enable people to speak out. This will assist without a shadow of a doubt. The relationship factor in safety leadership is real, and that is across the board. It's not just safety leadership, in my opinion. It is across the board within any organisation. What can happen if this sort of isn't followed? So here we have a director sentenced for failing to comply with HSE notices. I'll pull it back to health and safety now. But this director here, he actually went to jail. Okay, sentenced to jail, not a suspended sentence. This is 12 months for failing to respond and just disregarding health and safety executive HSE enforcement notices. This is really important. Only this week we've been talking about this in PCR Global. Should have a policy on how you're going to deal with those HSE interventions. It's not just directors. Site supervisor fined. So this time is a site supervisor. In the absence of the site manager, the site supervisor was fined because he was responsible for completing a permit for work that was on site and he did not do that. So under Section 7, the supervisor himself got sentenced. So I don't know if this is related to psychological safety. It's certainly related to leadership and definitely related to management. But it does highlight that if operatives, supervisors or managers, if they need to speak out, they should speak out. Quite often people, I see this in construction quite regular, they are put in positions they do not want to be put in. And they have a fear of speaking out. So that just shows there where that does go wrong. I'm going to jump back into some slides now on one of the courses I deliver on 31000. And where does this link back into 31000? Well, ultimately, the purpose of risk management, according to the world of ISO 31000 2018, is the creation and protection of value within organisations. If we link that to psychological safety, if we don't have psychological safety, are we actually going to improve performance within the organisation? It's not going to be optimal. Are we going to encourage innovation? I know for a fact, if I'm going to get shot down for speaking up and giving my ideas, then I'm not going to encourage, passing my good ideas on to the organisation. If we have psychological safety, then hopefully, look at number 3 there, we can support the achievement of the objectives of the organisation. The effect of uncertainty on objectives is the definition of risk, according to 31000. We need to achieve those objectives. So we need everybody to actually be on side, don't we? If we link these through to what I call the big three, that is the principles, the framework and the process within ISO 31000, which are all, it's an iterative process, then we can look through. If we know the principles, we will understand that risk management must be integrated. That requires people to be involved and speak up. The other one, inclusive, principle 4. What that means is we must involve all relevant stakeholders to get their knowledge, their opinion, their perception. By doing that, again, that will inform risk management. If people don't think they can speak out, then ultimately that we're not going to be in that position. Best available information. Same again when we look at one of the principles. Human and cultural factors, that's exactly what we're talking about. And that's just the principles. So we've got to know the principles. We've got to build the framework. How does this link to psychological safety? In the design, if we look at the design, within the design element, we've got 5 areas within that. And one of them is articulating risk management through our policies, allocating roles, responsibilities, authorities and accountabilities. Again, if we're allocating those roles, responsibilities, accountabilities and authorities to people who can't speak up, we're not going to get optimal risk management, are we? And if we jump across to the process, when we need to apply the process, communication and consultation. Again, if people don't want to speak up because they don't feel safe, for fear of being either reprimanded or just made fun of, then again, the risk management framework process is going to fail down. The risk management process, when you're applying it, it's gonna fail. So ultimately, I'll just show this other slide. We need to know the principles, build the framework, apply the process when thinking about that, those human and cultural factors. 8, 6, 6. Why have I put this in this slide? It's basically a way of remembering the principles, the framework, and the process. So what else can we look at briefly before we finish? Psychological safety, is it included in 9001? Yes, it is. Think about this. Let's look at clause 714. This is 9001, which is the quality standard. However, the organisation shall determine, provide and maintain the environment necessary for the operation of its processes and to achieve conformity of products and services. The standard goes on to say we need a suitable environment. It needs to be non-discriminatory, calm, non-confrontational. It needs to be free from stress. So psychological here, one of those areas. Burnout prevention, emotionally protective. So we can link psychological safety through to ISO 9001 2015 with regards to quality management standards. What about ISO 41000? You would expect it to be here. In 45,000. In 45,000, it sits within the hazard identification area, or it sits in a number of areas, but here we can see psychosocial risks, psychological and social, bringing them together as a category of risk which needs identifying and then risk assessing. Because hazards can be physical, chemical, biological, psychosocial, mechanical, electrical. We know there's categories of risk. In the world of health and safety, those psychosocial risks must be analysed. If we dip back into 31,000, just looking at the standard for the last time, that leadership and commitment. Remember, we've got to lead from the front. We've got to produce an environment where people are safe to speak out. That is just fundamental to any organisation. It's within all frameworks for any ISO. There's going to be that link back to leadership, top management commitment. Within that commitment, certainly, if you can apply, if you can develop a workplace where people can speak out, the whole organisation is certainly going to perform better. And that's it, really. So, thank you very much. I'm just going to dip back into the final slides. So, risk, the effective and certain objectives. That's our own objectives, not just the organisation objectives. I often like to mention the PMRAM. That's the planning mindset and applying appropriate risk assessment methodology. For anything that we talk about in risk management, if you don't have the planning mindset, i.e. if you're not a leader who gives time for things to be undertaken, then you're not going to create You're not going to create an environment where people can even come forward with ideas. Remembering the purpose of risk management is the creation, the protection of value. If we don't plan and put time aside, we will not be creating or protecting value. And then the RAM is the appropriate risk assessment methodology. There are many risk assessment techniques. If we look at ISO 31010, it gives us lots of various techniques in there. But even in the world of health and safety, there's various risk assessment techniques. And this is why when we're looking at the criteria element of ISO 31000, we need to apply the appropriate criteria, the appropriate tools, the appropriate practices. We look at the scope, the context, and the criteria. The risk assessment methodology falls under that. As always, stay safe, stay healthy, stay productive, and thank you very much for listening. Psychological safety, it is a big one. Thanks a lot.